All right, we're going to go ahead and roll on in and get started. Welcome to the Ask an Agroforester webinar series. My name is Emilie Tweardy. I'm an agroforester with Appalachian Sustainable Development. I've got Stesha here. If you want to say hello, Stesh, introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stesha Warren with Appalachian Sustainable Development, also an agroforester, here helping out with background tech support.
And we've got Eliza Greenman, our featured guest this evening, about to do a live agroforestry consult. And Pork Ryhne, who I cannot wait to meet more. I've met him real briefly, and I'm excited to hear more from him. But before we do all that, I'm going to share my screen and just chat you up a little bit about ASD and the programming that we have. Welcome, everyone. Once again, this is the Ask an Agroforester webinar series, and where we get to do deep dives with agroforestry professionals and get into the nitty-gritty. There's a lot of high-level agroforestry information out there, and we're trying to kind of crack the code of how to get some of those deeper questions answered. And so this is a real fun way to do it. We've been having a great time, and we look forward to another lovely evening of it. So here we are with Eliza Greenman, and here's where we're headed. We're going to talk a little bit about Appalachian Sustainable Development, talk about webinar controls, how to use Zoom if you're not familiar, and then we're going to have a live consult followed by a live Q&A session. A little bit about ASD. So we are living better locally. Our mission is to build a thriving regional food and agriculture system that creates healthy communities, respects the planet, and cultivates profitable opportunities for Appalachians. We've been around for 25 years, and the agroforestry program has been around since 2010, I believe. If you want to find any of the information for the programs I'm talking about tonight, you can go to our website, click on programs. This big drop down will appear, and most of this is under the agroforestry tab, with the exception of the Appalachian Harvest Herb Hub, which is just a couple rows down. But there's all kinds of great resources on the site, so definitely check us out. On to our actual programming. The Agroforestry Technical Assistance Program is something I'd like to call your attention to. If you are a landowner or farmer practitioner who's doing forest farming, alley cropping, or silvopasture, we have free technical assistance available for you. So all you have to do is go online and fill out this form. Someone will get back to you and give you some assistance. Maybe that's a phone call, maybe that's just sharing some resources or connecting you with another producer in your area. Maybe it's a site visit. There are a lot of different options there, but it's a really great resource, and we're building a nice, strong Appalachian agroforestry community through this program, and it's really fun to be a part of. We also have a newer option called the Maple Woodlot Assessment, which is for those folks who are interested in maple syrup production in Appalachia and are not sure how to get started. So if that sounds like you, check that out. We are a part of the Edwards Mother Earth Foundation grant for something that you've previously heard us talking about called Train the Trainer. This is now referred to as trainings for natural resources professionals, agroforestry trainings for natural resources professionals. So this program really is geared at professionals. This isn't a program for farmers. This is a program for people who are in a teaching space. Maybe you're an extension, maybe you're NRCS, maybe you do private consulting and you want some deeper knowledge on some of these topics, forest farming, alley cropping, and silvopasture. This program is definitely for you. You can go to ASD's website and sign up for alerts just about this program. It's not going to get you on any like major mailing lists. It's just alerts for this program. We've got online courses coming up at the end of May. That's going to launch. And we've also got field days, and field days coming up throughout the summer and fall. And we're also creating demonstration sites. So this is going to be a really great program. It's a really, really strong collaboration with a bunch of different institutes and schools and centers and all kinds of heavy hitters and big players in the field, including Savannah Institute that Eliza is a part of, and she may tell you a little more about that later. Also, I want to shout out to the Catalyzing Agroforestry Grant Program. This is a program that provides financial assistance for folks who are getting started in silvopasture and forest farming, there can be a lot of barriers to entry, particularly financially for those programs, because it just costs money to get plants. So it costs money to get them planted, costs money for labor, costs money to protect them, all of that stuff costs money. So if you're interested in these practices and you'd like some financial funding, check out this program. Full disclosure, at the moment, the funding is exhausted, and we are very much expecting to receive more funding in the near future. So applications are still open and rolling. And last but not least, the Appalachian Harvest Herb Hub. This is a facility that we have in Duffield, Virginia, that allows herb growers to get training in herb growing, also use shared equipment, be able to access equipment that otherwise would probably be too expensive for an individual grower, allows them to process herbs differently than they might be able to on their own. We also help market for you. We help aggregate orders. So a few smaller farmers can meet one larger order and get access to a buyer they might not otherwise be able to access. So check that out. And last but not least, we've got one more webinar after tonight in our series. It's Getting Started in Coppice Agroforestry with Mark Krawczyk, and that is this coming Tuesday. So we hope to see you then. I want to take a moment to introduce our guests for the evening. So Eliza Greenman, I'm really excited that Eliza's here. Eliza is someone whose door I feel like I've kind of been knocking on for a while, off and on, trying to rope her into speaking engagements for permaculture classes or this and that. So I'm really happy to have her here this evening. I'm going to go ahead and read off her bio. Eliza Greenman is a fruit explorer, horticultural historian, and designer / implementer of agroforestry plans that integrate livestock and humans into tree crop systems and orchards. Outside of her farming endeavors on leased land, she's currently looking to purchase a location in Virginia to plant tree crops repository for the Southeastern US. The ultimate goal is to assemble as many genetics as possible to create a nearly endless fruit, nut, and leaf drop scheme that will substantially or completely offset the cost of grain needed to raise livestock in the Southeast. And I'm actually going to read that last sentence again because I think it's so important. Like, there's hardly anyone else even considering this. The ultimate goal is to assemble as many genetics as possible to create a nearly endless fruit, nut, and leaf drop scheme that will substantially or completely offset the cost of grain needed to raise livestock in the Southeast. Like, we just dropped the mic. It's such an amazing thing that she's working towards. And if you are not familiar with Eliza, check out hogtree.com. Lots of great resources there. I think I was first introduced to Eliza through her writing on Hogtree because she's a beautiful writer and publishes a lot of essays there about her, I almost want to say shenanigans, because I feel like you're up to all kinds of stuff, like renting Airbnbs and processing persimmons in them and doing all kinds of interesting stuff. So I'm just really happy to have her here. I think she's doing fantastic historian, amazing anthropological agroforestry work, and is really kind of walking in this space that not a lot of folks are in. So thanks for being here, Eliza.
Happy to be here.
And I will take a moment also to introduce Rhyne. Oh no, I put the bio in my notes and now it's gone. I will say Pork Ryhne is new to me. I just met him this evening about 15 minutes ago. I already love him. We're already best friends. No, not best friends. He and Stasha are best friends though, because they found out that they live like half an hour away from each other. And when you're in the country, that's your neighbor. So let's see. I will say that I did look up Rhyne before this evening, and I'm excited to hear from him because I think he's not only doing like amazing work, but he also just seems like an amazing human being, a lot of charisma, and is just a cool guy. So about him, Pork Ryhne is the pork evangelist, an international livestock educator and farm marketing coach. He has trained over 5,000 full-time farmers and homesteaders in scaling profitable farm enterprises by helping them overcome their fears of underpricing and marketing their story. Yeah. Pork Ryhne has been featured in ABC's Localish, PBC's Resilient Agriculture, Homesteaders of America, and Mother Earth News. He is passionate about developing farmers as servant leaders on their farm, in their home, and within their community. Pork Ryhne is also the host of Agroeducators on YouTube. All right, so we're gonna do, you guys can unmute, we're gonna do our opening quickfire round, some like fun icebreaker questions before we go to the consult. So what is your favorite farm tool?
I have some electric pruners that are my absolute most favorite.
Brand recommendation?
No, just buy them off of Amazon. Like they're all good
Yeah,
and pretty affordable. But if for all of you getting into the idea of pruning trees, you'll get carpal tunnel and destroy your elbows. So
Yep.
the electric pruners are really incredible.
Preach it, sister. Preach it, sister. My favorite, probably the weed whacker.
Nice.
Especially when it comes to clearing out fence lining, especially if you're going to put down electric fencing.
Yeah. What about least favorite?
I hate the BCS. I hate it.
I have a
I'd
love-hate relationship. I can understand that.
Yeah.
I'd say for me, I definitely hate hose. Definitely hate hose. It's like when I first learned how to use the hoe, they didn't teach me right. So I was bending my back more than I should have. And yeah, this is why I don't do produce farming. That's hard.
Yeah, body mechanics in farming is not like stressed enough. All right. What is the first tree or plant that you remember loving?
For me, it was a mulberry. I had a seedling white mulberry in the front yard, and I climbed in it every day and ate the mulberries and distracted the blue jays.
Nice.
For me, it'd probably be a fig, brown turkey. I brought one from Texas when I used to manage a farm there, and it is still currently growing in the backyard of my mother's home. So
Aw,
3-4 years strong now. So really excited about that.
that's sweet. Last song that was stuck in your head.
I mean, probably it's always Shoop by Salt and Pepper.
I had to put that song on the other night because I couldn't like think of one of the lyrics, and I was like, I gotta hear it.
I'd say for me, it's like some Japanese music. So I don't even know like the actual title for it. But it's jamming. So, I just think about it in my head.
Awesome. And what's the messiest job on your farm?
So I'll do this one. I
Okay.
used to manage 900 laying hens.
Ooh.
Never again. Cleaning out the coops was a nightmare. So yeah, pigs were way more fun. Way more fun.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
with
think-
that many hens, it's hard not to make a mess.
Yeah, I think I've just zenned out of what's messy and just don't see it or let it bother me.
Nice. Ice broken. I'm gonna turn my video off and my sound off and let you take it away, Eliza. Thanks, y'all. And I'll give you I don't know, a 5-minute warning when we get to the window, if that works for you.
Sure.
All right.
Okay, everybody. So today's consult will be a little bit of like, this video chat thing, but in a little bit of slides, but not a lot of slides. So for all of you who might just be listening to this, walking around or something, know that you're not going to miss out on a ton of photos. And so, because that's usually when I give a consultation, it's over the phone for starters, and then collecting data from the client, moving forward, giving them homework, and then checking over all of these things. Just a quick note on my consulting. I took my consulting website down, which is fruitandfodder.com, because I am overwhelmed by the number of people who have reached out, which is, I guess, a great thing, but also like I had a farm fall through that I thought I was going to buy and plant and have planted by now, and just a lot of life changes. So if anybody's wanting a consult out of me, it's not going to happen for another few months until I can get my bearings back, because I'm all crazy in the head. But I did want to, so in thinking about, okay, who would I love to give a consult to that's in the Southeast, Piedmont region, that, you know, pig-minded. And the first person that popped into my head, well, actually, I reached out to Pork Ryhne and be like, do you know anybody? And then he was like, how about me? And so today, that's how this came to be, is today I'm going to give a consult to Pork Ryhne and just go through a lot of the strokes of what I usually do, but also get a little bit nerdy, and we'll see as time allows, like how nerdy I can get. But usually, you know, they're usually an hour session that I give, and so this will be a little constrained today. All right, so Pork Ryhne, let's go ahead and just give a little bit of background into where so he does not own land, and so this consult will be a blank slate consult, ground up, which I think is helpful for a lot of people who just are considering this idea in their heads. So Pork Ryhne, can you tell me, like, where are you looking? What are your goals, and what are your hopes and your dreams in this? Yeah, just tell me that.
You're like, just talk, Pork Ryhne, just talk. Good question. First of all, thank y'all for having me here. Thank you, Eliza, for making the connection too. I really appreciate that. I guess for what I'm looking for, I'll give a quick understory about my background. So I used to manage a lot of different farming operations and took a break so that way I can focus on myself, do some world traveling, train, educate people. And so now I'm at a place in my life where I can actually consider looking for land. So one prime spot I'm looking at that's for me would be somewhere in the Virginia Piedmont or the Shenandoah Valley. I love North Carolina, but the prices are a little bit too high. And so looking at Virginia as a potential option for me. In terms of land, I'm looking for probably around 30 acres. And my goal for that is a kind of future-proof land. So even in the event that there's a development around me, I won't have a measly 5 acres with a whole bunch of houses around me. I'll have at least 30 acres to play around with, which would be great for me. Also, I'm looking to make a portion of that part of a production farm and integrating agroforestry as a part of that. I love pigs. Let me tell you, pigs are expensive. Very, very expensive. And for those of you who don't raise monogastric animals, pigs and poultry, or maybe you do, you'll know that somewhere between 70 to 90% of the cost of just raising those animals is strictly feed. So for me, I want to kind of be able to future-proof when it comes to feed by being able to add a lot of perennial crops that will be both feed and fodder for my pigs. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about in terms of the landscape. In terms of the actual pigs, looking for a breeding style. So 5 sows, 1 boar, heritage breed sows, and a Duroc boar, and then allowing that to be a part of a farrow to finish operation. Most of it will be like farrow to weaning. So actually selling mostly a lot of feeder pigs. And then I'll have some that'll be saved over for classes, butchering demos, and then what's left will also be sold for customers as well. So that's kind of my plan, and I'm excited about what you're going to think for me.
Oh, well, you had also in a previous conversation, you had mentioned that you're also interested in alternative products that aren't just pig-based, or maybe are pig-based, but aren't pigs and pig meat. Are you seeing yourself like creating these businesses, or let's say like a processing business for, making nut oil or something, are you interested in being the processor? Or are you interested in selling what you have to somebody who's going to make a product?
I'd say a mixture of both, but predominantly I want to have the most market share that I can. So I am interested in fruits that would have a value added prospect to it. And also for agritourism. So there are a lot of folks who will do pick your own. That'll be an option I'd want to consider. So that will actually allow for people to come to the farm, low reduced costs, get to kind of explore the farm and build a relationship that creates memorable experiences, which is important because for me as a farmer, I need to make sure that I'm creating as many neurological connections with my customer base as possible.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and we'll just dive in here. So let's see here. And also, I do have a couple more questions. Are you interested in yourself working with the trees, or do you want to like lease these trees out to other people to work with them, basically? Like basically what you can do here is you can create an orchard. So are you interested in working, like you yourself doing this, or working with the trees, or leasing the trees out as like an orchard system to somebody where they allow you to run your livestock underneath?
So I would want to have ownership over, I want to have ownership of as much as I possibly can. That's just kind of my philosophy in life. I'd say in terms of management, I would like to have maybe not full involvement, but some involvement in it. And then the rest, I would have a worker or someone who's contracted to do most of the maintenance work for it.
Okay.
So I'd probably have 20% involvement because I'd have other things that I want to do. Farming will not be
Gotcha.
my main source of income, if that makes sense.
Okay, gotcha. All right, well, we're just going to, for the sake of this consultation, we're going to pretend that there's a piece of land that you are interested in that I've picked out already. So I'm going to share my screen here.
Oh, you found me some land?
I found you some land, Pork Ryhne. Okay, so this is a 30-acre piece of property, and you've submitted this to me basically, and you're thinking, okay, like I'm totally interested in an agroforestry system. I'm interested in the idea of processed fruits, processed nuts, also offsetting livestock feed costs, and basic agritourism, and bringing people in to be a part of your systems, like employees or something of this sort. And so what you see here is in this blue. So by the way, this program I'm using is Overyield, and it's from Propagate Ventures has put it out. I will have a disclaimer that I am not, I pay for this service. I am in no way sponsored by Overyield, and also it's very expensive, and it's not exactly what I'm looking for, but it's the best I can have right now, and it's the easiest to use for some consultations at the moment. So what I'll show you here is, here's the property outline. This is 30 acres. Of this 30 acres, Rhyne, Pork Ryhne, you have this area in blue is considered either prime ag or soils of statewide importance. Now, in the Piedmont region of Virginia and North Carolina, you have to look at what the dominant forest stand was, like, 200, 150 years ago. Basically, before this was pasture, you'd have to look back and see, okay, what was the what was the stand type? In a past life, I was a forester. And so I like have to always, I go about this a lot of times as a forester. Okay, so this was a white oak hickory site. And what that means is that also it translates into the pH of this site is pretty low. So that when we're talking about orchards, like if you know somebody who's got an apple orchard and they're in the Piedmont, they're spreading lyme like all the time, and or you know, several times a year. And that's in order to bring the pH up, because apples don't like acidic soils all that much, or they don't perform or yield all that well. And so what we're looking at here is the entire site is acidic. It's like in the pH scale, where 7 is neutral, it's like in the mid-5s, low to mid-5s. And that automatically, if you're thinking about, if you have no prior experience in spreading lyme, or you know, any, and you don't trust like the good old boys or the southern states down the road to tell you something that makes sense, which sometimes is very smart to not trust those people and reach out to a little bit higher on the food chain for advice. But this basically dictates what you can plant without adding inputs right off the bat. And around these blue spots here is wet soil, is pretty wet soil. And so we are, for the intents and purposes of this consultation, we're going to stick somewhat in the blue, but I'm also going to actually take you a little bit into the wet soils, because some of the plants that I think you would like or might be interested in do grow in wetter soils. So for your pig operation, you're interested in feeders and weaning piglets for sale. So raising feeders and then weaning piglets and just selling the piglets.
Yeah, so my from my calculations, I'd probably have somewhere around 150 weaned piglets, period, total. And so I would want 140 of those to be sold as feeder pigs to other farms, primarily like bulk sales, so like 10 at a time, 20 at a time, 30 at a time. So 10 will be held back for agrotourism, for meat yield, and for demo classes for butchery.
Okay, because yeah, 10 for 30 acres, or even for what's showing here in the blue, which is, it's not 30 acres, but it's probably like, oh, I think the top here is, let's see if it shows. Hold on one sec. I'm gonna move this window. 15.87 acres is what this is. So 10 pigs on 15 acres is like a lot of space. And
It's
so
overkill.
yeah, it's major overkill, like one pig per 1.5 acres.
Well, if I should have made some context, the goal will be to eventually evolve out of using those pigs for feeder pigs to sell to other people, and will eventually transition into whole meat market. So the long-term goal would be to raise pigs, more pigs for meat that I would sell, rather than giving those pigs as weaned piglets. Does that make sense?
Yeah, gotcha. Do you have any idea what your like, do you have a goal number? So for me, for example, in my business plan that I wrote for the farm that fell through, I was aiming to be at 50 pigs by 2025. So and actually, by the way, this actually is the farm that fell through, everybody. So let's all weep. But yeah, do you have a goal of where you want to hit and in what year?
So if I got this land, let's say yesterday, I'd probably want to sell at least 50 pigs by, what year are we in, 2023? So at least by 2026, I'd want to at least start selling up to 50 pigs, or at least
Okay.
50 pigs by that point.
Yeah, and if you talk to like, I mean, I'm sure you know Pork Ryhne, but like this is like completely backwards from CAFO pig rearing and even like the average pastured pig owner seems to have an overstocked rate of pigs on their property. And because I'm interested in helping you get trees on this property, it's not it's like best to have a good carrying capacity on the property that won't be super destructive. In the Piedmont area, you know, we get a lot of rain. And like the year of 2018, where we got 3 feet above average. And having pigs then, you know, made me realize that in our area, in our like humid temperate climate that gets quite a bit of rain oftentimes, it's really important to move the pig, have rescue paddocks, or have like, yeah, pigs have got to get out of here. These trees are very valuable, paddocks. And so that's why I think 50 pigs is probably perfect for this amount of space, plus your weaner operations. So really you're at like 56 pigs because of the 5 sows and the boar. So good. Also, just to FYI, like a lot of times people look at silvopasture, like when you see pictures of pig silvopasture, you see pictures of like the Spanish dehesa or the Portuguese montado, and these pigs like underneath trees and grazing and eating acorns, and it's beautiful and bucolic. And that's an arid climate. That's a Mediterranean climate. And those pigs are not, like that soil is not moist. The pig, and also, so the soil's not moist, it's quite dry. And pigs also, you know, what do? They root. And so when the soil's dry, their rooting is far less damaging than when the soil is wet. And so that's one thing I wanted to ask you, and it's truly a question that needs to be asked, and it's controversial, is where are you around ringing a pig's nose? Because in Europe, they're all rung. All the noses have rings and that are in these systems, and that's to prevent damage to the trees and the root systems. But I'm just wondering if this totally plays into man. It's okay if you're, and it's okay if you don't want to say, because I can also talk about either one, but it just helps for management of how to lay out this orchard. So where do you stand there?
Good question. So for me, I'm pretty open-minded. So my background's both in mostly like production-based regenerative agriculture, but I do also have ties to National Pork Board and Pork Checkoff. And so I see that with pig rings, they are an effective tool. I view them very similarly to, you know, any other form of IDing or things like that, where you have to do something to the pig. I would be maybe a little hesitant, depending on what my land management needs are. If I want the pigs to be more tillers, then I'd rather have a tiller. One thing that I consider is breeds that are not as prone to tillage. And so there are some breeds that have longer noses than others. I would not have an Ossabaw Island hog on that property. Their noses are really long. Wouldn't have a Tamworth, really long noses. So probably pigs that have shorter noses, which is why I'm thinking more of a Mason. Their nose is a little bit more on the shorter side, and they are more adept to grazing than to digging. They will dig, but it won't nearly be as bad as some of the other pigs that are out there. So I'd rather try out the breeds first And then from that point, figure out whether or not I'll need rings with the particular breeds that I do decide to pick. Does that
Okay.
help?
Yeah, yeah. Because I asked this because it just plays into like tree. It plays into grazing basically, and like how because even if a pig has a shorter nose that's not so conducive to rooting, it still may root. We still might get 3 feet of rain, extra in a year, and then things are just muck everywhere. And next thing you know, they're eating tree roots. So that's good to know. Also, what's your management style? Would you like to see these pigs rotated or yeah, basically rotated daily as they're moving like up and down orchard rows? Or would you like to see them be put into paddocks, where they can then go and rest? Either they rest in the paddocks or they rest in a central location. That's beside the point. But are you interested in like preformed paddocks? Are you interested in like moving temporary fencing, or having like an electric wire you set up that can be completely malleable?
Yeah, so starting off, and I recommend this to anyone who's getting into farming and is not acquainted very much with the land that they're on. I'd always start out with electric fencing regardless. Once I have a good understanding of the layout of the land and how the land responds throughout the seasons, through the pigs being there, I'll be able to eventually have more paddock systems. So the goal would be to create permanent paddocks, given the land, if it's good enough for it. But I am mostly a proponent for electric fencing overall. Electric fencing is a little bit temporary. Electric fencing is a little bit more time consuming. So I do have an invested interest in having more permanent fencing, though I can reduce my management time. But starting out, I'd use electric fencing.
Okay, so the other question that leads to this is, do you want to set up your own fence? I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, from a tree perspective, like say you had an orchard of one kind of fruit and an orchard of another kind of fruit, an orchard of another kind of fruit, and they're not mixed together, like they're separate entities. So like, I mean, just for this part, cherries, apples, pears, and you want the pigs to go in there and eat after it's harvest. You want the pigs to go in and clean up everything. Do you like that? Do you want them then to like just go funnel in and eat that orchard's worth, or would you like to moderate them to row by row with your fencing? So one day they're in one row, another day they're in another row. I can show you. Let's see, hold on. For instance, like this, where one day they're in this, the next day they're here, the next day they're here, kind of thing.
Okay,
Or they're
so
just all in here.
okay, gotcha. I'd say during the I'd have 15 acres, so each section's probably 7 acres, I'm assuming.
Well, I mean,
So
just for this, like this is only 2 blobs, but we could break this out any way we want.
right, so like I would think that the bottom section would have different fruit compared to the top section, is what I'm saying. So then they'd have a different season of productivity. So really, I would want the orchards to have a good layout for their harvesting season, and dictate my pig rotation based off that. So I think the pigs will go into those paddocks or rows when they're not when we're not harvesting or pre-harvest, let's say 3 months, and then they'll come back after things have been collected or people have picked through it, and then they'll eat and glean what's left over.
Okay.
So yeah, they wouldn't have like full free range of all of it, I don't think. I'd want to have a little bit more control over that. especially if we're gonna have
Gotcha.
permanent fencing.
Okay, that's great. All right, so with that, you know, in a future consult that we would have more time, I would set up, well, I'm going to tell you about some trees that I think you'd like with our remaining time, but I would set the distance of the trees, basically the alley width, so the width between tree rows. I would set that based on rotational needs sometimes. So like depending, 10 pigs, you know, can do like, you know, a 1/16 of an acre in a day kind of thing. And I would like set you up a grazing schedule. But for this, we're just going to talk about trees now. Okay, so you had mentioned UPIC is of interest. And then let's just say UPIC, offsetting of livestock feed costs, and then maybe like selling some to a processor or something, or selling some by mail and using your brand to like, you know, have boxes of things. So the first thing for this property, what makes a lot of sense to me is in considering the acid soils, considering also that this is water here, and then this is water, and then this is water. Considering all of that, and by the way, contact for all of you wanting to like look into watering systems and permanent fencing and stuff like that, and you have water on your property, contact the Soil and Water Conservation District in your county. I know that they suck in many counties, and it's really unfortunate, but contact them because they're the ones that have, if they're okay, if they're decent human beings, which some are not, but they're the ones that have contacts with the NRCS, who, and it's more easy to apply for and get funding for fencing out your waterways, which can essentially work for you as perimeter livestock fencing. And also putting in permanent crossings over water and putting your wells in. And like, for example, the one in Northern Virginia where I am, they have an incredible offset. It's like 75% of costs are offset. And so also you can get in touch with the like forester that works for your county, who then will get in touch with NRCS, and they'll look into different ways to offset. You know, you'll say, I want to plant wildlife plantings, which is what, for right now, that's my major thing that I say is I want to plant wildlife plantings. And the forester comes out and you talk with the NRCS agents, and then you talk about what that cost share looks like. So there is money, but it's very difficult just to walk into an NRCS office and just be like, what's up? I'm looking for some money, because that doesn't work for me. Maybe it'll work for you. I don't know. Okay, so based on what's going on here and what I've heard, I think that if you had a decent, say you were like since this, we'll take this for example. This property is an hour away from a major metropolitan area. And because it's an hour away, you can consider a more diversified UPIC operation. So, you know, there's probably Asian populations, there's probably just more ethnic populations are within reach. And we'll travel out to you. And so what I would recommend for the acidic soils is going with Chinese chestnut to plant. And I'll just put this here. Chinese chestnuts are usually spaced at maturity 40 by 40. So that means in between your tree rows, you have 40 feet of space to move. And so that would mean you're having to set up, if you don't have, just like for this example, this isn't like perimeter fencing. This is just the way it is. So you would have to set up your own fencing temporary fencing for how you want to move livestock through here. Chinese chestnuts are usually ripe mid-September through October, potentially into early November. And so in thinking about that for your drop scheme, pigs love chestnuts. You don't want them to eat too many, so it's important to have some diversity in their diet because I'm sure you're aware of soft fat that happens, but soft fat means that your fat is literally just soft, and when you have the processor make sausage for you, it turns into like a pink homogeneous goo rather than like what people want to see with sausage. Unfortunately, this is not so much a problem in cured meats, but due to the regulatory problems in cured meats in the United States, and also accessibility, I would say you'd need to offset the soft fats with, or sorry, the chestnuts with some feed, like barley. Also proteins are good. And so in speaking of proteins, let's see here. All right, this is going to be a little bit hard to see. Well, here, I'll hide that. Speaking of proteins, this line, which is interplanted between the 40 by 40 chestnuts, is mulberry. And mulberry leaves themselves have a very high protein, generally between the ones I've tested are between 15% and up to 28% protein. And that is the green leaf, like the earlier season leaf actively growing. But when you're later on in the season, when chestnuts start to drop, maybe you get a frost. And what happens when you get a frost? Those mulberry leaves drop. And so that's a really great, and they eat, pigs will gobble them up. So that's a really great way to give them some extra protein from the plantings, while also like having them eat the chestnuts. You also, so I have a little slide here. Let's see here. To talk quickly about mulberries. There's three basic types of mulberries for me. There's the drops one crop of mulberries. And so it might be just a heavy crop that drops over a 2 or 3 week period in June into July. Drops, mulberries cover everywhere, and you bring the pigs in for an early feed. Mulberries are high in fat, or they're about 7% fat, and they've got a lot of great things going on. Despite common thought, red mulberry or native mulberry really isn't around in the Piedmont. It's mostly hybrids of white and red, if not mostly white. And so with that, like you're getting, red mulberry has higher polyphenols, which, you know, is just the nutraceutical aspect of getting it this, you know, getting quality feed into your pigs. But that's not to say that it's not in the hybrids. So there's the one drop crop, then there's the everbearing, which is my favorite. There's quite a few cultivars out there of everbearing. It is a hybrid between red and white mulberry. It will drop from June into August. It's a known southern silvopasture crop. People were planting mulberries for hogs in the 1800s. Everbearing mulberries for hogs in the 1800s to provide basically the summer feed up until August. And then there's the leaf crop mulberry. This, I'm finding in my experiments, needs to be pretty much pure white mulberry. In Asia, you said, pigs are monogastrics, as you mentioned earlier. So are silkworms. So in Asia, mulberry leaves feed monogastric silkworms. And so if you want to do that in any way outside of just letting the leaves drop, if you want to be in charge of like cutting the trees like these people are right over here, and feeding and just chop, it's literally like chop it, a branch off and drop it, and the pigs just eat all the leaves off of it. If you want to do that, the chances of it regrowing are much higher with with a pure white mulberry. And so this is just matters when you're shopping around.
So
And
quick question.
sure.
How does the white mulberry, the leaf crop, compare to, let's say, certain varieties of bamboo as a fodder?
They have a lot higher protein and they have a higher digestibility. So, and a higher mineral content. Bamboo has, and pretty much non-existent tannins. Bamboo seems to have some tannins, but the prize with bamboo is that it's green all winter and in our area. So, I've yet to successfully feed bamboo to pigs. I suspect it needs to be ensiled, which means it needs to be fermented a little bit. And like this, I forgot I had a little video. This is a Chinese mulberry ensiling process, how they start it, basically. Let's see if it'll load.
Oh, so it's short.
Yeah, so
Okay.
this is a coppice system. So this is one way, by the way, just one way of how they do it. But in our climate, we can get at least 2 cuts per year. If we were to just prune branches off the tree, we can get 2 cuts off the year where you're going through with pruners, chopping, dropping, they eat, and the next day you move them, you chop, drop, eat, but if you were to industrialize this process, you would want to go this Chinese route where and actually this is nearly how they do bamboo. It's just the bamboo has to be way beefier. The machinery has to be way beefier to do bamboo, but this chops it, cuts it, chops it, and then they ferment it and then feed it out. All right, so back to the map. So that's
I'm going to chime in
chestnuts.
just briefly with a 5-minute warning.
Okay,
Just throwing it
I
out there.
think we're doing fine. I'm just gonna.
Yeah, you're doing great.
In persimmons. So that's chestnuts and persimmons for you. Also, so Asian populations, actually a lot of people are going to come and want to pick up chestnuts, and you can sell them by the pound. I've been seeing basically $5 a pound ish, that people will, maybe if they pick them up, you want to sell them for less, and the ones you pick up. So it's just something to think about. You can get about around 1,500 pounds an acre with chestnuts. And so they're just, to me, they're a great pairing with mulberry. And yeah, so that's my one of the things I would recommend with 40-foot alleyways. The second thing is persimmon, American persimmon. Actually, all persimmons. I've got a little slide where you can set up the drop for you based on the species of persimmon that you're using, or the subspecies of persimmon you're using. So in addition, so in the Piedmont, in the deep south, like original Silvopasture was mulberry orchard with also persimmons in that orchard. And that's because when the mulberry stopped dropping, the persimmons started dropping. And so the hogs would just go to town. In Eastern North Carolina, persimmons have traditionally been viewed as hog feed. And as you get above around Interstate 85 and higher, persimmon, that's what I've heard recently called the persimmon pudding belt, where they're being bought and sold for processing to make persimmon pudding, which is also very popular in the Midwest. And so that's just one culinary item to think about for persimmons. Is it can make, there is a market. It might not be that much alive, but you can throw a persimmon festival and make it happen. But the thing about persimmons is the American persimmon, there's they call it races, but I don't think that's true. I actually think these are two different species. But there's the 90 chromosome American persimmon, which came about from from around Illinois, and indigenous groups over a really long amount of time very likely spread it through North Carolina, through Virginia, and through Georgia. It's a smaller tree. It's like an apple-sized tree. The fruit are larger, and they drop earlier in our area. So cultivars like Croc and Jewel are around among the earliest. They'd be like late August for you. So that would kick off your persimmons. Then there's hybrids and Asian persimmons that will kick in around probably the first week. The very earliest Asian persimmon in your climate is around the first week of October, and can go into December, probably to Christmas. It just depends on the frost for that year. When they fall, so that's also this is probably a you pick for you to bring in crowds. Is these trees are short, and you have to cut the fruit off the tree until but for the pigs, the fruit that's left, like say the very top of the tree, after a few frosts, that fruit gets really watery, or like a really watery, and drops to the ground, and that's when they just slurp it up. And then there's the southern persimmon, the 60 chromosome persimmon, which is the taller tree. It's almost like a forest tree in many respects, and that will drop fruit probably with it from late September, but it'll hold and can drop as late as February. And so this is not very marketable. The fruits are not large, like the 90 chromosome. They're generally smaller, but they are a late season pig feed, and that's one of the hardest things to find, is late season pig feed. So one more thing about chestnuts, going back, there's 3 types of chestnuts that you could plant. Chinese is the most marketable, actually is the marketable one for you, but for livestock feed, the Seguin chestnut, which I personally have been working on building a population of for sale, is extremely precocious. Mine flower in its first, and after being 1 year from seed, they start flowering. At age 3, they're producing pretty decent amounts of crops, and they're ever flowering. So in terms of climate resilience, I love the idea of, okay, late frost got you down, no worries, I'm going to throw more flowers and produce more fruit, just like the ever-bearing mulberries. And then the chinkapin, which is probably growing near to wherever you're looking. I mean, it's pretty widespread. Smaller birds will eat it, but it's mostly just it's not marketable outside of a livestock feed. So yeah, I think we're out of time, but that's a rough this 4 sessions and 40 worth of things in 45 minutes, and they go way more in depth, and I would help you plan all the things. But there you go.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Pork Ryhne, do you want to do you have any follow-up questions that you want to go ahead and throw out there right now while it's all real fresh?
Actually, no. I mean, Eliza did such a great job of explaining things that I didn't have a need to ask really any additional questions. And if something popped up, I have her phone number, so she can't run away from me.
Yeah, I mean, there's much more to say and much more to help you with, and getting it down, because pigs can be dangerous in tree systems. And so there's a lot of coaching that I would give you.
Nice.
In addition to tree plans.
Excellent. All right, we'll do our quick fire round with you two, and then we will go into the live Q&A. And we've got some good questions in the chat, or not the chat, in the Q&A section. So this is a good time, folks. If you've been holding on to those questions, go ahead and enter those now while we're doing some fun stuff. Okay, so round 2, do you have any secret talents?
Pretty good at thumb wrestling. I'm very good at thumb wrestling. I have double jointed thumbs.
Oh, yeah, I never thought about that as an advantage, but that makes sense. Underrated talent, underrated skill.
Mhm. I don't know if I have a secret talent. I don't know. Most of my life's not a secret, so I'm like, I don't think I have anything secret. But no, that's a good question though.
Maybe your secret talent is being really genuinely transparent. All
I'll
right.
accept that.
If you're going to be reincarnated as an animal, which one? If you could choose.
I think my spirit animal is a squirrel, and I hate to say that, but I pretty much have I have a lot of squirrel-like tendencies in the fall.
You know who else said that? Is Sean Dombrowski.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. You're going out and propagating and like squirreling things away and planting little
Mhm.
trees here and there. And yeah.
Yeah, scrolls would definitely fit. Yeah, that I like that one. So I think about like what are my favorite animals. And a lot of people think it's pigs, but I actually relate more to goats. And the reason why is because goats are mischievous. They're highly intelligent, not as intelligent as a pig, but goats are mischievous in all the wrong ways. They're intelligent in all the wrong ways, constantly getting into trouble. And I would know because I used to manage a grade A goat dairy operation. And yeah, they're a pain in the butt. I can be a pain in the butt sometimes too. Try not to though.
You're stubborn and you'll eat anything. Is that what you're trying to tell us?
You
Yeah,
hate
actually,
water.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. What's the last thing you got in trouble for?
I don't know. I get
Oh,
away
man.
with a lot of things.
Getting in trouble. Yeah, and I can talk myself in and out of anything.
Maybe that's a good secret talent.
Oh, no, well, secret's out.
Two birds, one stone.
I got caught. I kind of got caught trespassing in a park nearby after hours, and I ran. And that's it.
Was it a germplasm mission?
No, it was walking my dogs.
Oh. I was expecting it to be that exact story, but about gathering plant material.
No.
She's all in the up and up, folks. You heard it here. You heard it here
That's
first.
right.
All right. And what do you wish you'd known when you got started?
Like farming specifically?
Yeah. Yeah, let's go with that.
Honestly, nothing. I'm grateful that I didn't know certain things about how hard it was going to be, how broke I would be. Man, I used to live off of $500 a month. You want to talk about broke? But I'm grateful for those opportunities and those experiences because it helped make me not just a farmer, but also the educator that I am today. People say, why don't I work in extension? And I tell them, most of the people don't farm and they can't relate to their farmers because they haven't experienced the hardships or the need for discipline like many of our farmers have today. So grateful for those experiences.
That's a great answer.
I think for me, it would have been great in the beginning if I knew that everything was infinitely complex and all the solutions seem to really just be band-aids to the unknown.
Interesting. I like it. I like it. I think that, yeah, that beginner's mind is so wonderful in so many ways, and also like has that tendency of oversimplification. So I could feel that. All right. Oh, we've got a bunch of questions. So let's start ripping through them. Okay. So what is your basic methodology when laying out a fruit and nut drop scheme for hogs? How do you start? So you just went through this process, but maybe you could kind of clue folks into like, you know, like if you have a sort of start here, end here methodology.
Well, I mean, it depends on how comfortable you are with or knowledgeable you are with trees. So like if you're coming into it as an orchardist, then I would say, okay, well then I'll like give you some schemes, some drop schemes for apples and for pears and for trees that require skill to raise. So that's also like getting land or leasing is really dicey in the agroforestry realm, and it's really unfortunate. So that's a whole other thing to talk about how do you get started. But like for people, most people aren't tree people like me. And so, I mean, they love trees, but they're not like in love with trees. And so one of the things I would say is you would want to choose trees that are much lower input, that have lower disease, inherent lower disease loads, that you are able to, and yeah, that you would be able to grow without a whole lot of effort. And so that would bring in, that is persimmons. That would be like, yeah, pecans are pretty easy. Oaks, which, a lot of the timber trees that might produce some fruits or nuts are advisable in that regard. And yeah, like I could probably name some, but oaks have to be, yeah. Everything also has its like intricacy. So acorns, you hear them like, oh, they're an amazing pig feed, but like, red oak acorns have a lot of tannin, and tannin can be an anti-nutrient and cause your pigs to lose weight, nor do they actually want to eat them. And so like that, there you get into that as well. So yeah, I would say if you want to have something to read, of course the go-to like manuscript in this is J. Russell Smith's A Permanent Agriculture, Tree Crops, A Permanent Agriculture, where he highlights a lot of tree crops. I actually have lived next door to where he grew up, and so I sort of tapped into him in many ways. And so that would be a good start for thinking about just getting your toe, dipping your toe into the realm of tree crops. And I will say also that I work for Spanish Institute full-time with their tree crops improvement team. Actually, it's just 2 people on the team, but I'm one of them. And we are breeding tree crops for agroforestry. And so those crops are American persimmon, and at least in making them and selecting for hardier ones, seedless black locust, American elderberry that can be machine harvested, improving blackcurrant, hybrid hazelnut that can be machine harvested, and chestnuts. We're working on chestnuts as well.
Wonderful. Next question. If you are creating your ideal hog silvopasture system to get as much of the feed from trees and forages as possible, what are your key plant species on both the forage and tree crop side, and how much? So I feel like you already answered that, but this second part, how much can you envision realistically cutting the amount of bought feed?
Yeah, so what I just talked about today, what I blew through with Pork Ryhne, is in the pig's life in a feeder pig's life on the farm, which might be like 5 months or 6 months tops. Just with chestnuts and some persimmons, you're looking at a 30% reduction, cutting your feed cost by 30%. So in order to further cut that, you need to, there's drop, so there's like rotation on drop, and then there's like picking up the drop or harvesting the fruits and the nuts for feeding later, or the leaves. And so other crops that I really like hazelnuts. The Rutgers hazelnuts are great. So that's a late August through October. Pecans are very low yielding in terms of an orchard system, but in the Piedmont, we can get away with some of the southern cultivars of pecans that drop very late for us. Like they'll ripen, but they just like March. And that March is amazing those are the doldrums. Silage, I think, is very important. So the idea of tree hay, but like fermenting it, I really like. I also like the idea of, when I was in Spain, earlier this year, I met a guy who lacto ferments acorns, and I ate some, and they were actually the high tanning acorns. And I think that is a real future for feeding later in the season and taking like the bounty from the landscapers and dealing with. But yeah, I guess I have like a lot of dream scenarios depending on what climate I'm in. But I tend to like zone 7A, and I have very complex dreams, so I'll just stop it with that.
Can I chime in on the pig part?
Please.
Cool. Yeah, so most people who are thinking about getting pigs, especially in this kind of field, are probably going to consider a heritage breed. Generally, your commercial breeds, commercial crosses, they're going to be at around 250 pounds in 6 months. Most folks who are raising pigs outdoors are now pushing towards 300 rather than 250. So if you're going to raise a commercialized breed, that's at least around 8 months. But if you're raising like a heritage meat breed, like a Tamworth, let's say a red wattle, even a Gloucestershire old spot, things like that, they're going to need at least 8 months to get to around 250 pounds. And usually by 10 months, they can get up to somewhere around 300 pounds. If you're going to raise, let's say, an English large black, that's at least a year. If you're thinking about a Mangalitsa, that's around a year and a half. Kunis, also a year and a half. Mayshans, about a year and a half. So understanding the pig breeds will also help you kind of dictate when they're going to be ready for processing, and when your fruit crop is going to need to be ready for them to actually eat it. So those are definitely things to consider. And with that, I'll pass.
Yeah, well, and with that, like, the Iberian hogs, they're truly fed on fodder, and acorns are 2 years old when they're slaughtered. And so that economic model just doesn't fit in the United States right now, in terms of, but it could, if you could cut your feed costs, but you're in the management cost after that. So
Yeah. So this kind of dovetails right into this. Beyond the regular tree species like you've discussed so far, apples, mulberries, persimmon, oak, chestnut, etc., are there any tree crops you think are currently undervalued in hog systems?
I think a lot of invasives are incredibly undervalued. I'm a huge fan of working with invasives that I have, whether they're in the pasture themselves or they're trees that are coming up. Ailanthus is an incredible, or sorry, not ailanthus. I'm sorry, it's not ailanthus. I actually don't like ailanthus just because the cows will eat it, but it gives me a big headache if I cut it. So I try to stay away from ailanthus.
Yeah, thanks.
But I like autumn olive. I actually plant gumi instead, just because people freak out. But I like, in terms of like nutrient cycling, and thinking about an orchard system and thinking about soil health, the invasives have a much higher, in general, protein or nitrogen to carbon ratio in their leaves. which generally also makes them better fodder. Yeah, I like Albizia, I like Eleagnus, I like a lot of things. And also like there's nuisance trees that I like as well. Like I like hackberry. It's got tons of silica in it that are really good for just these, these minor nutrient tweaks that we don't know about because all we ever see is like commercial feed recipes. Willow as a pain reliever. I mean, if you're gaining 2 pounds a day, you want a pain reliever. And then like, the black walnut as a dewormer, like feeding leaves, or like having, the husk maggots in the black walnut themselves. Some pigs go after those maggots, and in doing that are ingesting quite a bit of juglin, which acts as a dewormer. So just like there's a ton of trees that can work as like in a holistic like pig raising system that might help like your gain efficiencies, like if you can cut your worm load down or prevent you from worming, which is an extra cost. So yeah.
Okay, do you have any thoughts on ideal male to female ratio in an American persimmon orchard? And also, what about your thoughts on spacing?
You don't really need males unless you are planning to sell seed or do any breeding. Maybe one, maybe two. I mean, a lot of American persimmons are parthenocarpic, so they'll produce fruit without seed. And they don't understand it yet. We're actually working on this. Savannah Institute with other partners, mega nerds are working on this with us. And yeah, like 60 and so like the 60 chromosome persimmon and the 90 chromosome persimmon, if there's no males around, they'll both produce fruit. And they'll both be seedless. And so it's thought that it might be some sort of triggering of flowering. So you don't need a whole lot. I would probably just, and also like if you grow early golden, so there's also a bunch of trees that are somewhat monoecious. And so then they tend to be descended from early golden for now that we know. And so early golden will produce male flowers. And that's probably all you need. You really don't need much.
Spacing thoughts?
For persimmon? Generally, like, I wouldn't go less than 15 foot in row, 20 feet between is, if you wanted to cut it, get your rows short. If you do 20 feet in between, it depends how long your rows are, but you might want to have a break in the tree lines every now and then to allow for pigs to get it, so you can have a 40-foot alley or something like that, essentially.
Nice. Have you noticed a difference in protein between male and female mulberries? Asks Tim Coddington.
That's a good question. And the answer is no. In looking at like somehow years ago, one of my business partners and I, Taylor Malone, he and I got into like the Chinese online repository of silk cultivars, which is like thousands. And to this day, I have no idea how we got in there because it's completely blocked now. But a lot of those cultivars are male for leaf harvesting. Generally in dioecious species, the males will be are more vigorously growing because they don't have to put any energy into fruit production. But the protein content between the two, I don't think differs. Yields may differ, but not protein.
How do you deal with an ever-bearing fruit drop when you're using a high rotation? Do you just miss out on a fair amount of fruit drop as you rotate the animals out?
Yeah, so this is where I am a fan of having diversified, like having a net, like a chicken farmer on that's pasturing that comes behind you, you know, partnering up with other livestock that can really make great use of the falling fruit. And yeah, and also like just from a nutrient perspective of what trees need, like mulberries can't take, they can take as much hot nitrogen as you want to throw on them. And so, whereas if you were grazing, like if you were running chickens underneath apples, you are running a chance of having basically fire blight is what I've seen, pears and apples. So
Thing.
yeah, diversify, get more people on the property, get somebody harvesting. You know, I bought a fruit net that wraps around the tree, harvest them too. I mean, having an abundance is not a problem, really.
Good answer. Noah Simon from Bread Tree Farms asked, would you be willing to share the link for the Chinese mulberry coppicing and silage video?
I honestly don't know it. I downloaded it and I don't have it. I can post it like on my website or something. I could probably upload it. But yeah, it's just it's, by the way, it's just using corn silage equipment.
Oh, huh.
And so yeah, somebody should do a SARE grant for that.
Hint, hint. Let's see. Anonymous says, can you explain we've probably already covered this, the 90C versus 60C persimmons. Is it just different pollination windows? Is there anything else you want to say about that?
They're just totally, I mean, so we just recently this year got the 90 chromosome persimmon sequenced. And what that has shown is it contains the 40 chromosome persimmon, but there was a mutation or a lost persimmon species that combined to create this. So they don't pollinate each other. The 90 chromosome like happened like right at the Laurentide ice sheet. So what they think is where it first arose. So probably some sort of mutation going on. And yeah, they're all over the place. Both of them grow in almost all of the areas, all the ranges. It's yeah, all the native ranges.
That's super interesting. All right, it's 8:28. We have 3 questions left. Do you want to try to rock and roll through these?
Sure,
Do you have a few
sure.
minutes? All right, thank you. Another from Tim Coddington. Do you think black walnut, hybrid bitternut, and pecan could be incorporated into this type of system? Similar drop time as chestnut, but much harder shells / hulls.
Yeah, I have some of this stuff incorporated on different plans. Wait, it was black walnut, bitternut, hybrid, and pecan. Is that what you said?
Yep.
So for black walnut, there are I really would rely on some sort of a cultivar selection in this regard, and there are thin-shelled black walnuts. So I would like there's one called Eggshell, and it's out of Iowa, and so like that's important is to think about that because you got to consider jaw strength, and yeah, they can break in, but also like I don't want the pigs to break teeth. Like
Yeah.
a thick shell can really be a boon. Bitternut hybrids.
I misspoke. It's hybrid butternut is what he asked
Hybrid
about.
butternut. Yeah, sure. Hybrid butternut. That means with Japanese walnut in it. Sure. And once again, you just want the shell thickness is thinner, yes, but you want to use cultivars that are thinner shelled. You also want to consider like what juglone is going to do. Like a lot of these have a high fat content, a lot of those nuts, but also like black walnut has a really interesting tropically feral flavor. And that I have tasted in my fat after finishing pigs for 2.5 months on walnuts. So, and it wasn't bad, but it's definitely like somebody's like, huh, you know, I had some people tasting and like, this is different. And so, yeah. And then once again, pecans, high fat, thin shell, so you're good there, but you are running the risk of having a soft fat. And so you'll have to counteract it with a protein, basically, and probably some other, like barley.
Excellent. Jacob Rutz asks, what do you think is the profit potential for silvopasture for hogs? Thinking per acre on, let's say, a southeastern Piedmont landscape, the time horizon and how cheap the land needs to be is something I think about. So the first part of that is, what do you think is the profit potential for silvopasture for hogs?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, like, to me, if you, but like you mentioned in the last part of this question, it really matters what you're paying for your infrastructure, what you're paying for your mortgage. Like, you know, all of those things matter hugely in terms of what's breaking a profit. And so let's see here. Hold on, let me pull up. I think I have some numbers here per acre. Oh, not right here. You know, off the top of my head, I can't just tell you what the profit per acre is for 1 to 50 pigs or whatever. I would have to do that probably. I'd have to probably do that in another session.
Happy to have you. Last question. Wynn Miller, whoop, whoop. Hi, Wynn, asks, in your agroforestry studies across the globe, what system did you find very beautiful or inspiring?
I loved Corsica, and Corsica is like a wilder version of like the Spanish Dehesa, only it's got like way more hills. And so with that comes like a higher diversity of oaks and other species that all contribute to great pork. Yeah, and yeah, I think Corsica in general is probably like one of my most favorite places, because also they have mulberries, they have like figs just dripping with fruit, you know, and they seem to not have the restrictions that like the Spanish Dehesa or the Portuguese Montado have. Like, they're allowed to prune, they're allowed to get in there and they're allowed to plant whatever cultivars they want, whereas it's pretty highly regulated in Spain and Portugal.
And just a little plug here. I'm going to drop it into the chat for, let's see, everyone. This is a link to Eliza's website where you can read her really beautiful essay about her time in Corsica. So check that out.
And I've just never finished my Silvopasture part 2 on that Corsica trip, but it'll happen. It's
One
like
day.
half written. Yeah.
One day. No hurry. We're on tree time.
That's right.
Well, that brings us to the end. Where can folks find you and what's next for you? What do you got going on? Any exciting projects coming up?
No, not really. I've had to so like with the farm falling through that I thought I was going to buy, that I thought I was buying, I had to then like completely pivot. And so I had 30 acres worth of trees that needed to find a home, so I could, like, rather than I like give them away or sell them or whatever, which is a lot of work, I decided just to put in another nursery, which is taking all my spare time to fill up, but it's working. It's almost done. And yeah, I'm probably going to be at the Northern Nut Growers Conference, talking persimmons, because that's one of the ones crops that they also accept there in Missouri this year. But this year is, yeah, rather than me going everywhere and doing everything, I'm really having to reevaluate what is important and what I can do in the future.
And folks can find you at, how do you say it? Eliza Apples?
Yeah. Yeah.
Eliza Apples or
Eliza
Hog
Apples.
Tree?
I think I might own the other one too, which is a double A, but yeah, and Hog Tree.
Yeah.
My salami is running out, and my salami guys that used to make it for me are no longer making it for small
Oh.
farmers. So it's the last of the last, everybody.
Charcuterie is so hard as a farmer to figure out. Yep. Pork Ryhne, where can we find you and what are you up to in future, near future?
Well, not cool and exciting things like starting a nursery like some people are. Let's see. I have a trip to, where am I going? Upstate New York. I got to speak at a conference there. And then I think sometime around July, I will be going back to Africa. And I'll stay there for about a month to help train some farmers over there. And got a couple other speaking engagements. One will be in Wisconsin, another in Virginia, and then I will be going to Alaska in November to speak at an event. If you want to find me, you can go to my Instagram at pork.ryhne, RHYNE. And then if you want to see YouTube videos, you can go to agroeducators. And it'll be under Pork Ryhne Media Agroeducators. You'll find me there. Other than that, that's it.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, Stasha dropped the porkryhne.com link in the chat. And I suppose folks can probably find your engagement list there if they want to come see you speak or something. All right. That brings us to the end. Thank you both so much for being here. Attendees, if you would like to donate to ASD to help keep this programming coming, feel free. Stasha will drop that in the chat. This will be up on YouTube sometime tomorrow, probably in the late evening. And other than that, I just want to thank you both again. It's been really inspiring to listen to what you're both up to and just to hear all the wisdom that you have to share. So truly, 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 thank you for being here and donating your time to this. We so much appreciate it.
All right. Have a good night.
Y'all too. We'll see you on Tuesday, everybody.
All right.